Very sure you've come across questions along the lines of, why are women more willing to forgive cheating men, while men are less likely to forgive cheating women? Or, why do men expect to be forgiven for cheating when they find it difficult to forgive cheating? A closely related question to all this, which will or will not be answered in this video, is along the lines of, why is it okay for men to have multiple sex partners, while the same, quote, privilege, is not afforded to women? Ever heard women ask, why is it that men do everything for a woman until they get her, then they take a back seat? Then they stop trying? Or, why is it that men are not the same when they want a woman and when they already have her? For the record, women don't remain the same either, as they're different in the whole pursuit situation and after they get into a relationship. A more distinct differentiation is observable between women in the dating period and after the marriage. Women actually pride themselves in not being consistent, while they expect men to be consistent. I'm sure you'll hear women say that they're different in their 30s compared to what they were in their 20s. But men should be consistent. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. So the reasons why women are more willing to forgive cheating than they are likely to be forgiven when they cheat can be divided into three. 1. Taking us back to the parental investment theory, which largely explains how and why men and women choose partners the way they do. 2. Focuses on the female-centered nature of the dating process, and intimate relationships by extension, with women being the recipients of constant grafting from men's side and them having to do little to nothing, as well as having the luxury to say no at the end. 3. References to and highlighting the whole morality concept and women having all the power when it comes to being cheated on. In a series of videos posted on this channel, we highlighted how gender differences in parental investments influence how the sexes choose partners, and most importantly in the context of the videos in question, why men steal sex from women, or sexually coerce women. In a nutshell, men's and women's reproductive success are obviously different. For women to achieve reproductive success, they have to first go through the whole gestation period of 36 to 40 weeks, then nurture the offspring to self-sufficiency, which is anywhere from 4 to like 8 or 10 years. For men, reproductive success just requires copulating with a fertile woman, and it's done. Differences in men's and women's reproductive success translate to variations in the respective limitations. For women, the limitations on reproductive success revolve around the time and energy they're willing to devote to carrying a pregnancy and nurturing for the newborn. The limitation for men's reproductive success is the number of fertile females they can copulate with. The differences in men's and women's reproductive success explain why men are more willing to engage in impersonal sex, void of any emotion, while women are generally pickier when it comes to selecting mates, with priority being on security, which takes the form money in most societies today. The sexual revolution of the mid to late 20th century that is largely associated with the invention of oral contraception in the late 50s, and the subsequent legalization of abortion in the 70s, witnessed women, in the pursuit of so-called equality, assume men's quantity-based mating strategy, and the abandoning of the female-evolved quality-based mating strategy. Before the whole sexual revolution, women restricted sexual activity to prosocial achievements, that is, for a woman to engage in intercourse, the man had to exhibit prosocial achievements, which include a stable job or income, a reliable residence, and pro-familial values. Women's restriction of sexual activity to prosocial achievements warranted them social protection in the event of a pregnancy, through shotgun marriage. In the event that intercourse resulted in pregnancy, then the man was forced to marry the woman and provide the security that comes with marriage. The sexual revolution came with fading of the whole shotgun marriage concept, a subsequent rise in the number of single-parent homes, a reduction in the length of intimate relationships, and basing relationships more on sex than emotional connections. A part of the sexual revolution that is never talked about, or talked about at least enough, is the relationship between the revolution and the male providing role. In other words, the sexual revolution faded the biological need for men to provide or be the primary providers in homes. Scholars suggest that the male providing role has historical and biological backings. On the one hand, the historical requirement for men to provide revolved around role specialization where women didn't work but rather, concentrated on homemaking. As such, the only way through which women would access valuable resources would be through their husbands. On the other hand, before oral contraception, women engaging in sexual activity resulted in pregnancy, but that changed with the availability of contraception and legalization of abortion. However, the male providing role still persists. The modern woman still remains picky when it comes to choosing a mate, but not as picky as our grandmothers and great-grandmothers were. Most importantly, the male providing role is still fundamental to most marriage contracts today, despite women being part of the workforce, having similar opportunities, owning property, and being paid the same as men. Our great-grandmothers being pickier than our sisters was not only for the benefit of their security, but also for the interests of the men. Particularly, our picky grandmothers and great-grandmothers provided greater paternal certainty to our grandfathers and great-grandfathers than our sisters offered to us. For the record, and this cannot be emphasized enough, men, and the male section of any species, are obsessed with paternal certainty. In the animal kingdom, when animals such as lions take over a pride, the first order of business involves killing all the cubs left by the previous male to push the females into reproduction mood quicker. Men putting up with cuckoldry, you're not the stepfather but the father who stepped up, is a very foreign concept that was largely introduced by women so they are not held accountable or have to face the consequences of not being as picky as their predecessors, thereby ending up as single parents and blame everyone else for their choices. Have their hot girl summer in their prime, prioritizing the F-boys over the family-oriented men in their prime because they're not as fun, have a couple of babies with them, once all is said and done, get with the family-oriented men once they're out of their prime, and convince them they're not the stepfather, but the father who stepped up. These men get with these women for two reasons. 1, they hope that once they take up another man's responsibilities, then these women could also have their children. 2, they know full well that without being cuckolded, the chances of ever landing that woman, in her prime, without any baggage, are slim to none. Feminism, through campaigns such as My Body My Choice, has sought to make sure that women have complete autonomy over their bodies by completely personalizing choice to women. But, while choice is personalized to women, consequences are socialized to include men. For instance, for the most part, women decide who they sleep with, where, when, and for the very few who know themselves, how, as well as the kind of contraception to use. While women strictly maintain this choice, since men taking it away is either rape or sexual assault, the outcomes of sex are sought to be socialized. She did not make the baby alone, here's 18+ years of child support for you as a participation trophy. And, the whole making the baby with the father argument only holds when she wants to carry the baby to term, even if the putative father repeatedly makes it clear that they don't want to be a parent. When they want an abortion, without requiring the consent of the putative father, even the case of a marriage, then no one cares that she didn't make the baby alone. Since she's carrying it, her body her choice, and she is allowed by most constitutions to go ahead with the abortion. Again, get to have their liberal face in the most fertile years of their life, personalize their choices in that period, ignore all the family-oriented men working for the future by instead choosing the bad boys who are working for the weekend, have a baby or two by them. Then realize they are not willing to settle or raise a family, socialize the consequences of the choices they personalized. Then get with the family-oriented man who they ignored in their prime because he wasn't fun, and hit them with, "You're not the stepfather, you're the father who stepped up." In an attempt to make sure that they don't question their masculinity for getting with someone who would never look at them even once in their prime. Anyway, what do we know? It's a man's world, they said. Back to the whole point of the video, why are women more likely to forgive cheating than they're actually forgiven? And what does parental investment have to do with it? It's easy. Looking at union or relationship formation through the parental investment theory lens explains the historical perception of women as sex objects and men as success objects. Of course, one is perceived as a massive problem by the same group of people who encourage the other. So, when women are choosing a partner, everything is secondary to security, which mostly takes the form of money nowadays, at least a bit more than it has historically. Quite ironic considering women work and own property now, something they weren't able to do before. For men, obsession with paternal certainty implies that top of the list for men when choosing a partner is a tie between fertility and sexual exclusivity. Promiscuity on the part of women threatens paternal certainty, which is a massive problem for men. You might have noticed that when some of the top-tier men in any society are involved in infidelity, they're more likely to be forgiven by their partners than the rest of us, well of course, as long as the other woman doesn't threaten her security. Think of the fact that only women could be involved in paternity fraud, since a man cannot take the product of a promiscuous interaction and bring it to their wife for them to raise as their own, most definitely not unknowingly. Simply put, in the context of a union, men and women prioritize different things, with these things having historical and biological backings. Historically, women have always married up, due to hypergamy, others may call it greed, but the common ground, women tend to marry men who rank higher than them in society. Men have always settled for women younger than them for fertility and a promise of paternal certainty. Infidelity threatens paternal certainty in a bigger way in the context of what men want in women than it does security, as in the case of what women want in men. All this evidenced by the fact that polygamy, a man with multiple partners, was the norm for the better part human history until recently, when popular culture threw jealousy into relationships, but still exists cultures throughout the world. Plus, women marrying up and being pickier than men implies two things. 1. Men have always married down since they're less picky than women are, especially considering men's reproductive success and how that translates to sleeping with anything that has a heartbeat. 2. Women may find it harder to replace men they've settled with than men would find it when replacing women they've settled with, since they aren't picky. Against this backdrop, it makes more sense for women to forgive a cheating partner, because terminating a relationship leaves her with two non-optimal options: either settle with another man of lower value than they had, or stay single for a considerable amount of time, if not forever. On the part of the man, his priority in a woman is fertility and sexual exclusivity, which translates into greater paternal certainty. So, to achieve reproductive success, men have always gone for youthfulness and sexual exclusivity, while women have always gone for maturity and security or money. Women adding sexual exclusivity onto their requirements of men, since men require it from them in the name of equality. You know, what a man can do a woman can do better, would be like men expecting security from women, since women expect it from them. So, what if men decided to marry like women, just up? What if men only married, or prioritized, women with money? How many women would be in relationships and marriages today? The general question becomes, which one is easier? A woman replacing a responsible, providing man who is family-oriented after they cheated, or a man replacing a cheating wife with a younger woman? The answer to that explains why women would more often hold on to a relationship after infidelity than would men. But, we welcome your point of view.